Red Dust Part 4. Visitors Chapter 13. Collision Course.
1. I/Oumuamua was the first confirmed interstellar object detected passing through the solar system. Formally designated 1I/2017U1, it was discovered by Canadian Robert Warwick using the Pan-STARRS telescope at Haleakala Observatory in Hawaii on 19th of October 2017, approximately 40 days after it passed its closest point to the Sun on 9 September. When it was first observed, it was about 33 million kilometers, 21 million miles, 0.22 AU from Earth, about 85 times as far away as the Moon, and already heading away from the Sun. 2I Borisov, originally designated C/219Q4, was the first observed rogue comet and the second observed interstellar interloper, after Oumuamua. It was discovered by the Crimean amateur astronomer and telescope maker Gennady Borisov on 29th of August 2019. 3 I/ATLAS, also known as C/2025N1, was an interstellar comet discovered by the Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, or the ATLAS station at Rio Hurtado, Chile, on 1 July 2025. When it was discovered, it was entering the inner solar system at a distance of 4.5 astronomical units from the Sun. The comet followed an unbound hyperbolic trajectory past the Sun with a very fast hyperbolic excess velocity of 58 kilometers per second, relative to the Sun. 3 I/ATLAS posed no threat to Earth, which at the time was on the opposite side of the Sun as it passed close to Mars. It was the third interstellar object confirmed passing through the solar system, after 1 I/Oumuamua and 2 I/Borisov, hence the prefix 3I. Astronomers first saw the fourth interstellar object as a flutter in the noise. At the Vera Rubin Array in Chile, a graduate student flagged a faint, slow-shifting smudge that didn't fit any catalog. Hours later, a Chinese wide-field survey confirmed a second pass. By dawn in Hawaii, the Pan-STARRS solver gave the smear a provisional designation and the trajectory cone that made the back of every neck in the room go cold. Aphelion unknown, albedo anomalously low, mass wrong. And the arc it carved through the starfield looked less like a cometary wander and more like intent. By the time the sun rose over Washington, Tokyo, and Brussels, the word rogue had escaped the tight loop of astronomers and entered briefings. Not a star, too dim, not a brown dwarf, Spectra disagreed, a planet-sized intruder, cold and lightless, surfing a path that would thread the inner system in months, not years. Projected missed distance to Mars, uncertain. Best case, a brush that would tear at Mars's infant surface like claws through gauze. Worst case, a direct hit. In that case, Earth could hardly expect to escape the collateral damage. Terraforming control in Jezero Mars colony went silent for a full 20 seconds as the models painted ugly possibilities. The new blue-white swirls over the poles, the first thin rivers in Elysium. 10 years of frantic cooperation, a greenhouse of a world, at risk of a single dark stone out of nowhere. There was not time to evacuate the planet, even if there was a place to evacuate to. On Earth, old fears woke up and put on uniforms. NORAD's displays filled with vector fans and Delta V numbers. The European Space Council called an emergency session and invited every highly credentialed astrophysicist in the field. Across the room, an African atmospheric physicist drew a deep breath. Assuming the mass estimate holds, she said, the kinetic energy at Mars periapsis exceeds anything we can counter with diversion drones or chemical stacks. Then we don't counter it, said a French scientist, voice clipped. We nudge it, early, far out. Thousands of small pushes become one large enough to produce a slight angle change. That is all we need. It isn't a rubble pile, the physicist from Africa replied. It's coherent and solid, and heavier than theory prefers, Our drones won't make the least bit of difference. What about nuclear? Asked a younger scientist who never used a word without tasting it first. We've modeled standoff bursts for asteroid deflection since the beginning of space exploration. If we put every strategic payload into the sky and meet it high, outside the inner system, we can nudge its path. Enough to miss Mars. A murmur rose, equal parts alarm and relief. For a flickering instant, the logic made a strange, seductive sense. Take the worst thing humans had ever built and repurpose it to save Mars and possibly Earth. A Brazilian ambassador spoke what others were thinking. Every last weapon? Yes, came the answer, calm and forceful. All of them. Rapid disarmament by necessity. We don't have time to argue about who keeps what. We either throw Earth's entire arsenal, or we watch Mars die, and Earth is wounded. The motion was obscene and elegant at once. In the corridors of power, ethics always arrived late to the meeting. But this was different, and mankind was listening in and felt the axis shift. Grandpa would have whispered a parable in that moment, about Prometheus returning fire to the mountain. But Grandpa was half a galaxy away, paired with Zerfecti or Orpha, inside pearl-lit corridors, searching for a home that had dissolved into twin suns. Earth had to make choices without him. The vote did not take days or even hours. There wasn't that much time. It took minutes. Treaties older than most of the delegates were torn apart and set aside. Safeguards and dead man keys were rewritten by fevered hands. In secret caverns, sealed doors opened. Silos that had slept through generations woke to the smell of oil and old metal. Submarines surfaced and headed for the nearest port. International teams verified compliance, having received free access across the globe. On international media, leaders stared into cameras and told the world the same thing with different words. We are going to throw all of Earth's nuclear missiles at the incoming planet. It is our only hope to save Mars and spare ultimate catastrophe here on Earth. They named the mission Asterion. Not myth, they explained, but star tamer. In practice, it was a scrabble of everything that could climb. Heavy-lift boosters, hypersonic sleds, sea-launched rockets, lunar mass drivers dumping their caches, even antique stacks pulled from museums and refit with modern avionics. Naval crews in the North Sea welded adapter rings in 40-knot winds while long-retired engineers wrote code from hospital beds with their grandchildren sleeping in the chairs. Warheads left vaults in armored convoys and crossed borders under flags of emergency. At airfields, you could taste the history peeling off resurrected missiles. Nations, doctrines, ghosts. On the pads, guidance packages took their place where old targeting brains have been cut out. The new destinations were not military targets or critical cities. The weakest and slowest rockets were first to go, giving them time to arrive in a synchronized pattern with more powerful and faster missiles. Launch after launch stitched contrails into the sky. The first wave bent outward, braked into the dark, and then lit their transfer burns together until their blue-white plumes were a dragon rising over the night side. People watched. In plazas and kitchens, from beds and barracks. You could hear it when an entire species holds its breath. In multiple mission controls, primarily in the northern hemisphere, the vector boards grew petals as the interceptors fanned into a geometry so careful it looked like art. The plan, such as plans can be in physics, was simple. Meet the rogue far out where a nudge could matter. Detonate in a layered halo to push, not shatter, the intruder. Detonation geometry had been shaped by 10,000 simulations. If any of it worked, Mars would live. If it didn't, the night would be very bright, and then very, very dark. Astrion's lead architect, a woman whose hair had gone gray over a decade of terraforming, signed the final release with a stylus her daughter had decorated with stickers. Go, she said, to no one and everyone. The first interceptors reached their station. Across a volume of space larger than the orbit of Mercury, the bombs bloomed. If you'd been there with bare eyes, you wouldn't have seen anything at all. The distances erased spectacle. But the sensors saw. The wave fronts etched themselves into graphs and logarithms. For a brief, unbelievable instant, a human idea of hope radiated from a shell around a cold stone. It was like pushing a mountain by breathing on it. The blast front spilled over something that was not quite a surface and not quite a field. The rogue planet rolled on, imperturbable, like an ancient animal, refusing to notice the insects on its hide. On Earth, the first panic didn't have words. It had only the sound a room makes when hope falls out of it. The second panic had too many words. Mars' missed distance is widening. On a screen reserved for oddities, a thin line had thickened. The rogue's vector had bent not away from Mars into safety, but away from Mars and toward the inner system, toward the third planet, whose skies were still aglow from the exhaust of 10,000 departures. Track update, said a controller whose voice had become very small inside a very large building. New solution indicates perihelion adjustment. Projected Earth approach probability now. He stopped. Swallowed, non-zero, rising. In orbit, the deep space antennas that listened for everything and nothing picked up a hiss across their baselines. Not radio, not EM. Instead, a pressure change in the background noise of the solar wind, as if something had turned its face. Jezero's weather dome flickered. For a long half-second, the lights along the central ridge dimmed and then came back brighter. Children asked why the grown-ups were crying. Inside the rogue planet, the Ashiec-tuen-Kai were not surprised by the atomic blast. They had been surprised by the first signal, the hydrogen pie whisper that had convinced them to take their long, slow look. And they had expected Mars. Quarantine. Delay. They had not, however, expected a young world to attack with what to them was caveman weapons. The missiles with their detonations rattled against the cloak's false gravity and spilled off the metamaterial mantle in pale auroras. The atomics did not even bruise the hull. They did, however, ring the bell, a bell that those inside the Ashiec-tuen-Kai heard as a species needing to be tamed.